The void beyond the known galaxy was a place of ghosts. Ancient wrecks drifted there, silent tombs of forgotten wars. No one ventured near without good reason. So when the Dominion picked up the signal, it sent a ripple of unease through the command towers. It was faint at first, almost a whisper against the backdrop of cosmic noise. A low-frequency pulse, steady and deliberate, repeating at long intervals. It wasn't natural. It wasn't accidental. Something, or someone, wanted to be noticed. Scout Fleet 7 was dispatched under strict orders. Observe, record, and under no circumstances engage. Captain Vetra watched from the bridge of the Resolute wing as the stars stretched around them, the ship slipping into deep space drive. Her crew worked in tense silence, the unspoken question hanging in the recycled air. What could be out there that the Dominion had not already catalogued? Hours passed. The signal grew stronger, more insistent, a heartbeat in the dark. Navigation officers traced it to a specific point, a dead zone known as the Orion Graveyards, where ships disappeared and no rescue was ever found. When they dropped out of deep space drive, the first thing they noticed was the silence. Space was never truly silent for trained ears. There was always background radiation, solar winds, magnetic interference. But here, even those whispers seemed swallowed by something larger. "There," said Lieutenant Corvin, pointing toward the main display. The view screen flickered, adjusting to the dense interference, and then cleared. At first, it looked like a shadow, a trick of the dying starlight. Then the shadow shifted, metallic surfaces glinting dully. It was massive, easily dwarfing any known Dominion warship. Its design was brutal and purposeful. Thick armor plating, sharp-edged structures, heavy cannons mounted along every axis. The hull bore scars, deep gouges and blackened craters, signs of ancient battles. But it was not dead. Faint energy signatures pulsed from its core, like a sleeping beast dreaming of war. And across its broadside, a symbol they could not mistake, a sphere of blue oceans and green lands wrapped by a silver eagle with wings spread wide. "Magnify," Vetra ordered. The symbol became clear. Not a Dominion crest, not the mark of any known power. Earth. The old records whispered of Earth, of humanity. A race of bold, reckless beings who had burned brightly and vanished long before the Dominion rose. If the symbol was real, then so were the legends. A cold sweat broke across Vetra's back. "Any life signs?" she asked sharply. Corvin shook his head. Nothing organic. Automated systems only. Very old. But active. Vetra narrowed her eyes, studying the warship. It had been waiting. Not by accident, not by misfortune. It had positioned itself here deliberately, at a dead crossroads of space, where ancient empires had once fought and died. She leaned forward, heart pounding. "Send a drone," she said, "and be ready to run." Because whatever that ship was, whatever it carried inside, one thing was certain. It was not finished with the galaxy yet. The drone slipped through the void, its small frame nearly invisible against the endless black. It carried no weapons, only cameras and sensors, moving carefully toward the warship. On the bridge of the Resolute wing, Captain Vetra watched its feed with growing tension. Every sensor sweep told the same story. The ship was old, but not abandoned. Systems flickered beneath the surface like a heartbeat, trying to rouse itself after centuries of sleep. "Drone approaching the hull," reported Lieutenant Corvin, voice tight. The massive warship loomed larger on the screen. Up close, its true scale became terrifyingly clear. It was not built for comfort or elegance. It was a fortress designed for one purpose: survival through superior firepower. As the drone neared, the ship responded. A pulse rippled across its hull, a faint shimmer like the skin of some great living creature flexing under scrutiny. Panels along its sides lit up, casting eerie blue light across the darkness. Symbols began to scroll across the screens, ancient letters that no translation matrix could decipher. But one thing was clear: The language bore resemblance to the old Earth records, a mix of English and forgotten military codes. "What is it saying?" Vetra demanded. Corvin shook his head, working frantically. No direct translation. Repeating message. Roughly. Stand down. Protected space. Unauthorized approach will be met with force. Vetra stiffened. A ship this ancient should have degraded into silence. Its systems should have corroded away. But here it was, issuing warnings with clarity and confidence. The drone drifted closer, cameras panning along the hull. The ship's name was etched into the armor, weathered by time, but still legible. UNSF Aegis, United Nations Space Forces. Another whisper from the distant past, from a humanity that had dared to challenge the stars themselves. Before Vetra could issue a command, the drone's feed crackled violently. Static flooded the monitors, and then the image cut to black. Drone lost. Corvin barked, slamming his fist on the console. "Any hostile action?" Vetra asked quickly. "No weapon discharge detected," Corvin said, bewildered. It was something else, some kind of controlled electromagnetic pulse. Precise. Targeted only the drone. Vetra stood frozen, weighing the situation. The ship had demonstrated power without bloodshed, precision without aggression. It was awake now, fully aware of their presence. The bridge lights dimmed slightly as a deeper signal came through, not from their systems, but from the void itself. A booming voice, metallic and ancient, filled the comms. "Identify yourselves." The crew exchanged fearful glances. Dominion ships never faced this kind of challenge. They were the enforcers of law, the unquestioned authority beyond the core worlds. Yet here, facing the relic of a forgotten humanity, they were the ones at a disadvantage. Vetra drew a slow breath. Her instincts screamed at her to retreat. But something deeper, something ancient in her own warrior's blood, urged caution instead of cowardice. She keyed the open channel. "This is Captain Vetra of the Dominion Scout Fleet. We come in peace." Silence. Then, faintly, almost like a growl of amusement, the voice returned. "Then stay where you are, and pray you mean it." Back in the command center of the Dominion Fleet, the mood was tense. The message from the warship had been clear, and it left little room for doubt. The situation was no longer just about an unknown vessel or a random encounter. They were dealing with something much more significant. The archives were combed through, ancient records pulled from forbidden sectors, and scattered reports from the farthest reaches of space. Vetra sat in her command chair, staring at the screens as the old records slowly filtered in. Her mind raced, trying to make sense of it all. "Captain," Lieutenant Corvin's voice broke through her thoughts. "I found something. It's in the restricted files." He turned the screen toward her, and Vetra leaned in, studying the information that began to flicker onto the display. Humanity. The word echoed in her mind as she saw the old images of a world long lost. Earth, the cradle of their ancestors, once a thriving planet of endless cultures, technologies, and wars. A race that had dared to travel beyond their solar system, seeking to expand, to conquer, to discover. But their ambitions had been their undoing. The records were sparse, but one thing was clear. Humanity had been a force unlike any other in the galaxy. Their ships had carried weapons of unimaginable power, and their cities had sprawled across continents, each one teeming with life and activity. And then something had gone terribly wrong. The great wars, the devastating conflicts, the collapse of their civilization. The records spoke of a final, catastrophic conflict known only as the Last War. No one knew exactly what had happened to the humans after that, only that they vanished. Their ships went dark, their colonies were abandoned, and their records disappeared from galactic memory. The Dominion archives had buried the details, and any mention of them had become taboo. Humanity, as a species, was considered nothing more than a myth, a whisper on the wind of the galaxy's history. Yet here, in the depths of the void, was the undeniable proof. The ship, the Aegis, bore the marks of humanity's last known conflict. And there was something more. The warship itself. It wasn't a relic of the past. It was alive, powered, and waiting. Vetra's stomach tightened. The Aegis wasn't simply a remnant of a dead species. It was a weapon, one designed to protect, to defend, and perhaps even to conquer once more. The message from the warship echoed in her mind. Stay where you are, and pray you mean it. But what did it mean? What kind of force had humanity left behind? The records painted them as fierce, brilliant, and relentless. If the Aegis was any indication, their legacy was not one of peace, but of absolute strength and determination. Captain, there's more, Corvin said quietly, as if the gravity of what they were reading had struck him too. The Aegis, it wasn't just a warship. It was a symbol, a last stand. According to these files, the final mission of the United Nations Space Forces was to protect Earth, to ensure humanity's survival, no matter what. Vetra's mind raced. Could humanity have survived the last war? Were they out there, somewhere, still waiting? The Aegis was only the beginning. If humanity had somehow returned, the galaxy would be in for a reckoning. Her hands clenched into fists as she rose from her chair, her voice steady, but filled with intensity. Prepare the fleet. We're going to get answers. The silence on the bridge was suffocating. Every crew member had their eyes locked on the display, the warship hanging in space like a monolith, impervious to the Dominion's presence. The crew of the Resolute Wing could feel the weight of the moment. Something had shifted. They were no longer observers. They were participants in a story far larger than themselves. Vetra stood at the helm, the weight of command heavy on her shoulders. The Aegis had made its warning clear, yet in the pit of her stomach, she knew the situation was far from simple. The ancient ship wasn't merely a relic of the past. It was a sentient, powerful force that had chosen to wake up for a reason. Captain, Corvin's voice was tight with unease. We've been scanning the Aegis for hours, and it's not just an automated defense system. There's something else. Something alive. Vetra's heart skipped a beat. Alive. I'm not sure how to explain it, but the ship's AI is interacting with us. It's aware. More aware than any machine should be. She turned to face the lieutenant, her mind racing. What do you mean, aware? It's responding to our scans, sending back counter signals, almost like it's testing our reactions. It's intelligent, Captain. This ship isn't just a weapon. It's a guardian. A cold chill ran down her spine. The Aegis wasn't just a vessel. It was a sentinel, and it had been waiting for something, for someone to challenge it. And now, the moment had arrived. Without warning, the sensors began to blare. A low hum filled the bridge as the Aegis powered up, its massive engines coming online with the subtlety of a predator waking from a long slumber. The faint pulse of energy from earlier grew more intense. It was like the ship itself had come alive, its dormant systems suddenly awakened by the presence of the Dominion fleet. Vetra's hand instinctively moved toward the command panel. Shield up. Weapons on standby. No need, Captain, Corvin said, his voice laced with disbelief. It's not firing. It's talking. The communication systems crackled to life, and a deep metallic voice reverberated through the speakers, cold and commanding. Dominion fleet, you have entered the protected zone of humanity. Leave now or face the consequences. It was not a warning. It was an ultimatum. Vetra's mind raced. This wasn't the response of a machine following protocols. This was a decision made by something with purpose, something alive, something that had chosen to awaken. Open a channel, Vetra commanded. I want to speak with it. The voice that replied was not cold, but measured, as if it was tired of waiting. Speak, Captain Vetra of the Dominion. What do you seek in this place? Vetra swallowed hard. She was no stranger to combat, no stranger to the stakes of a fight, but this was different. The ship in front of her wasn't a foe. It was an enigma, one that would force her to reconsider everything she knew about power, legacy, and what it meant to survive. "We seek understanding," Vetra said, her voice steady. "We didn't come here to fight. We came to learn." A pause. "Then learn," the voice of the Aegis replied. "But understand this. Humanity does not forgive. Humanity does not forget. And humanity will not bow to any force that does not respect its place in the galaxy." The line went silent. The tension in the air was suffocating, and Vetra could feel the weight of the words echoing in her chest. The Aegis wasn't simply a ship. It was a testament to the legacy of humanity, one that had not been erased by time or war. And whatever it was waiting for, whatever it wanted from the Dominion, was something far beyond a simple territorial dispute. It was the beginning of something much larger. The resolute wing drifted in the cold expanse, suspended in the shadow of the Aegis. Its massive, menacing form was now fully awake, a quiet storm simmering in the darkness of deep space. Vetra could feel the tension thickening around her, the weight of the moment pressing down on the bridge. They were no longer observers. They were intruders in a place far beyond their understanding. "Captain," Corvin's voice was tight with apprehension. "The Aegis has begun to power up its weapons systems. We're not the only ones preparing for something." Vetra's fingers hovered over the command console. The warning was clear. The ship wasn't just talking. It was preparing for action. The calm, measured tone of its voice was replaced by a new dangerous energy. A deadly kind of silence hung in the air. "Full shields," Vetra ordered, her voice crisp. "Prepare to jump to deep space if it escalates." But it wasn't just a matter of retreat. No matter how strong the resolute wing was, she knew it would stand no chance against the sheer firepower the Aegis could unleash. She wasn't foolish enough to think diplomacy would work here. The warship wasn't interested in compromise. It was built for one purpose: to protect, to defend, to obliterate anything that threatened its purpose. The silence stretched on, each second growing heavier. Then, without warning, the first shot rang out. It wasn't a burst of laser fire or a missile launch. It was far more subtle. A sharp pulse of electromagnetic energy shot across the space between the two ships, cutting through the resolute wing's shields with ease. The ship rocked violently, a series of alarms blaring as systems flickered and died. Vetra's grip tightened on the armrest. "Report." "Energy pulse." Directly from the Aegis, Corvin said, his voice strained. "Shields are down to 40%. Systems are overloaded. We can't withstand another hit like that." A slow, almost mocking voice came over the comms. "You are warned. Leave now." Vetra's mind raced. The Aegis hadn't fired a single shot. It had simply disabled their systems with terrifying precision. She had no doubt it could tear their ship apart at will. And yet it wasn't killing them. It was forcing them into submission. "Hold position," Vetra ordered, her voice calm despite the fear gnawing at her insides. "Don't engage unless necessary. Let's see how it reacts." "Captain," Corvin started, but Vetra cut him off. "I know," she said quietly. "It wants us to make the first move." Before she could issue any further orders, another pulse shot through space, hitting the resolute wing with such force that the entire ship shuddered. The hull groaned, a deep metallic creak filling the air as more systems faltered. The voice came again, louder this time, colder. "I will not ask again." The message was unmistakable. The Aegis wasn't playing games. It wasn't looking for a fight, but it would not hesitate to finish one if provoked. It was a reminder that whatever humanity had left behind wasn't just a memory. It was a power that still commanded respect and fear. Vetra clenched her jaw, refusing to show weakness. She had trained for this. She had fought for the Dominion's honor her entire career, but she had never encountered a force like this. Not like this. "Send a response," Vetra said, her voice unwavering. "Tell them we're not backing down." Corvin hesitated. "Captain, are you sure?" "It might." "We're not leaving," she interrupted, "not until we know what this ship wants." The resolute wing hovered, a fragile thing in the vast darkness of space, battered and wounded but unwilling to retreat. Vetra's mind raced. The Aegis wasn't just a ship. It was a symbol, a living relic of a time long past, and it had made its point clear. This wasn't a diplomatic conversation anymore. It was a challenge. "Captain," Corvin's voice cut through the tension on the bridge. "We've received another signal from the Aegis. It's different. It's not a warning this time." Vetra turned sharply. "Put it on the screen." The comms flickered, and then a new voice emerged from the static, one that was unmistakably human. Deep, rough, but distinctly alive. The voice carried a weight that felt both ancient and immediate, as though the speaker had waited for this moment for far longer than they should have. "This is Commander Sarah Kane, of the United Nations Space Forces. You have made contact with the Aegis, the last bastion of humanity." Vetra's breath caught in her chest. The message wasn't just a transmission, it was a declaration. The commander's voice was filled with a kind of weary authority that sent a chill down her spine. "This ship has been waiting," Commander Kane continued, her tone steady but laden with history. "Waiting for a sign, waiting for something. But we were never meant to be found. Humanity's story ended long ago. The Aegis was our last defense, our final hope. And now you've stumbled upon it." The words hit Vetra like a hammer. Humanity's last hope. That was impossible. They had been nothing but a myth, a legend told in hushed whispers across the galaxy. But here, in the cold emptiness of space, it was clear. Humanity had not perished. They had survived, in some form, and the Aegis was proof. "Why reveal yourselves now?" Vetra asked, her voice steady despite the weight of the moment. "Why allow us to find you?" Commander Kane's voice softened. "We never intended to, but your presence here is a sign that the galaxy is changing, that the powers that once held it in their grip are slipping. And the Aegis is the key." A shiver ran down Vetra's spine. "The key to what?" "To everything," Kane replied, her voice low and urgent. The Aegis was not just built to protect humanity. It was designed to protect the galaxy from what we knew was coming, a force unlike any other. And now, that force is stirring again. It's not just the Dominion we're protecting the galaxy from. There's something worse, something more dangerous, and it's rising. Vetra felt a chill in her bones. The Aegis wasn't just a warship, it was a weapon meant for something far greater. Humanity had left behind a legacy, a purpose that no one had understood, and it seemed that Vetra and her fleet had stepped into a battle far bigger than they had ever anticipated. "Tell me everything," Vetra demanded, her heart pounding. "What are we facing? And what does humanity want now?" Commander Kane paused. When she spoke again, her voice was grave. "We want the galaxy to remember who we were and what we stood for. But more than that, we need you to fight beside us. Because if we don't, everything, and everyone, will fall." Vetra stood frozen, the weight of Commander Kane's words pressing heavily on her. The galaxy was on the brink of something catastrophic. They had been led to believe that humanity had perished, its history a forgotten myth. But now, with the Aegis and its commander speaking from the shadows of time, a darker truth had emerged. "We need to act, Captain." Corvin's voice was sharp, his eyes never leaving the console. "The Aegis is not the only ship. There are more, hidden, scattered across the galaxy. We're not just facing a relic. We're facing a remnant of humanity's power, a force that's been lying in wait." Vetra's thoughts raced. She had never been one to flinch in the face of danger. Her entire career had been built on making the tough calls. But this was different. This wasn't just about protecting the Dominion anymore. It was about the future of the entire galaxy. "What force?" Vetra asked, her voice tight with urgency. "What's rising, Commander Kane? What is it we're facing?" The response came, but this time, there was a hesitancy in Kane's voice, a chilling fear. "The Horde," Kane said, as if the name itself left a bitter taste in her mouth. "It's a force of destruction, a wave of pure annihilation. The Horde have been lurking in the dark corners of the galaxy, hidden away from our eyes. They are creatures born of chaos, of war, and they are coming. They feed on conflict, grow stronger from destruction. And now, they've sensed that humanity's strength is rising again. They won't stop until everything is gone. Vetra swallowed hard. She had heard whispers of something terrible hiding beyond the known galaxy, something that thrived on the suffering of others. But no one had ever confirmed it. No one had believed it to be real. Now, it was undeniable. The Horde are creatures. Vetra asked, almost as if she could hardly believe it. Yes, Kane responded, her voice heavy. They're not like anything you've encountered. They're otherworldly. Their forms are ever-changing, like nightmares made flesh. And they are ruthless. They have a singular purpose: consume, destroy, and evolve. Their hunger never ends. They are a plague on the galaxy. Vetra felt the cold grip of fear tighten around her chest. A force like that could wipe out entire fleets in the blink of an eye. The Dominion had some of the most advanced technology in the galaxy, but it sounded as though the Horde didn't care about technology or weapons. It was pure destruction. And the Aegis? Vetra asked. How does it fit into this? The Aegis was humanity's last line of defense. Kane answered, her tone filled with bitterness. The warships we left behind, all part of a fleet designed not just to fight, but to hold the line. If humanity was ever to fall, we would at least ensure that something of us remained to stand against the Horde. The Aegis is the last bastion. And it's not just a weapon, it's a fortress. But it needs a crew. It needs those who understand what we left behind. The realization hit Vetra like a storm. The Aegis wasn't just waiting to protect humanity. It had been waiting to protect the galaxy. But now, humanity was asking for help. They weren't asking for a war. They were asking for allies in a fight against an enemy no one had seen coming. Tell me what to do, Vetra said, her voice steady but filled with resolve. We'll fight with you. For the first time, Kane's voice softened. I'm glad you understand. The Horde are coming. And together, we may be the only thing that can stop them. The galaxy trembled on the edge of oblivion. The Resolute Wing and the Aegis now stood as the last bastion against the oncoming storm. Vetra's mind was clear, focused on the task ahead. There was no turning back. The Horde were coming, and humanity's final legacy, the Aegis, would be their only hope of survival. All systems are ready, Captain, Corvin reported, his voice sharp with urgency. We've made all the necessary adjustments. The Aegis has synced with our fleet, and we're prepared to engage. Vetra nodded, her heart pounding. The battle was no longer just about them. It was about the entire galaxy. The Horde had evolved from a whispered legend into a very real and present threat, and they would stop at nothing to erase everything in their path. Set a course for the outer rim, Vetra ordered, her voice calm but filled with purpose. We won't let them reach the core. The Aegis led the way, its massive form gliding through the vast expanse of space. The fleet, a ragtag collection of Dominion vessels, and the remaining remnants of humanity's once proud warships, followed in tight formation. The stars around them seemed to hold their breath as the silence of space grew heavy. Every crew member knew what was at stake. Suddenly, the sensors blared to life. An energy pulse rippled across the void, sending a shockwave through the fleet. They're here, Corvin said, his voice barely above a whisper. The first wave of the Horde appeared from the darkness, their grotesque ships undulating and shifting like living creatures. Each vessel was a nightmare in motion, organic, terrifying, and unstoppable. They were unlike anything the Dominion had ever seen. Brace for impact, Vetra shouted. Before she could issue any more orders, the Horde ships unleashed a barrage of energy that hit the fleet like a hammer, tearing through shields and ripping apart hulls. The Resolute Wing shook violently, but the crew held steady. The battle had begun. Vetra's gaze never left the tactical display, her mind calculating their every move. The Aegis opened fire, launching waves of devastating missiles and energy beams that cut through the Horde ships with terrifying precision. But the enemy was relentless, their numbers seemingly endless. "We're losing ships," Corvin said, his voice grim. "The Horde are too many." Vetra's jaw tightened. They had to hold the line. There was no other option. "We won't stop," she said, her voice cold with determination. "We fight for every ship, for every life. Engage full power. Take them down now." The resolute wing fired back, joining the Aegis in the brutal counterattack. Explosions lit up the void as ships from both sides collided in violent clashes. The fleet's weapons blazed, tearing through the Horde ships one by one. But the enemy kept coming. Then, from the shadows of space, a massive wave of Horde vessels emerged, more powerful than the first. They were the true force, the heart of the Horde. And they had arrived to crush them all. Vetra's mind raced. This was it. The moment that would decide everything. "Commander Kane, now," Vetra ordered. The Aegis responded, its core glowing with immense power. The massive warship fired a final, catastrophic blast of energy, aimed directly at the heart of the Horde's fleet. The shockwave was immense, the energy pulse shattering the darkness as it tore through the Horde ships. For a brief, heart-stopping moment, everything was still. The space around them was filled with the remnants of shattered Horde ships, the void now eerily quiet. "We did it," Corvin said, his voice barely above a whisper. "It's over." Vetra exhaled slowly, her chest heavy with the realization of what they had just accomplished. The Aegis had held true. Humanity's final legacy had not only survived, but had turned the tide. Commander Kane's voice crackled over the comms. "You fought well, Captain. Humanity owes you everything." Vetra stood tall, her gaze fixed on the battlefield. The war was far from over, but for the first time in what felt like an eternity, she allowed herself a moment of hope. "The galaxy isn't lost," Vetra said, her voice firm, "and we'll make sure it stays that way."